Hello, everybody. Welcome to Cafecito Con Conciencia. This is David Solis, and I am here
Susy Amezcua.
and Leonardo Rodriguez.
thank you all for taking the time to join us and choosing to listen to Cafecito Con Conciencia. Uh, I think you might be wondering, who are these three folks, on this audio behind your or on your ears, right, or whatever form method you're listening to us. Um, but we're just three folks, right, trying to come together and talk about different situations that are going on in our community, right? We hope to engage in critical pláticas, right, that revolve around education, activism, politics, ethnicity, but also our goal to build community, right, in this new virtual world where we might not be physically together, but there's always a way for us to join one another and share our thoughts, feelings, emotions in order to move forward. Today, right, we're gonna do a little we're gonna do a little sharing. So we're since it's our first podcast, we want you all to get to know our members. So we'll start off with Susie. Susie, tell us a little bit about yourself.
David, thank you for that introduction. So my name is Susy Amezcua. I am originally from Fillmore, California, but I live in Compton. So Fillmore, for a lot of people that don't know, Fillmore is in Ventura County. I usually try to describe it by Six Flags. It's the place that always has fires every August. But I was, but I come from like a background of my parents are both farm workers, so they taught me the importance of hard work. I've witnessed them work since early, waking up early in the morning and coming home late. My dad even took me. My mom and my dad took me to go work and just paid me $20 for the whole day. So they definitely shaped who I am, and they really, and they really like taught me the values of life. And I really appreciate David for starting this podcast and just giving me the space to be part of it, so we can again engage in pláticas and dialogues that are needed in the community, and what better time than right now when like there's a lot going on everywhere, right? A lot of people's identities are being attacked left and right, and I feel like we need more spaces for us to talk about it and to do something about it. So yeah, thank you and welcome to Cafecito con Conciencia. I'm gonna throw it to Leo now.
Leo.
All right. Hey, everyone. Glad to be here with all of you too. My name is Leonardo Rodriguez, but I go by Leo. I live in Reseda. I've lived here for all my life, for my 24 years I've been alive. I graduated from CSUN with a BA in media management. Now that I'm using that towards for post production, and what I'm dedicated focusing on with that is that I will be able to provide a voice for my community through video, and now being a partner on this podcast as well. It's important to be in these critical topics, discussing with others, especially in this time right now that we're living in. A fun fact about myself, um, let's see.
I got one. A fun fact about all three of us is that we're actually CSUN graduates, right? So, this podcast, CSUN can be overlooked. A lot of people are like, "Oh, I got to see some, oh, whatever." It's like a whatever, like everyone gets into CSUN, but CSUN's a very pretty, amazing campus. It's like grounded in activism and social justice. So that's a fun fact about all three of us, that we are former CSUN graduates.
Definitely. I agree there. I think it's so interesting how three folks, you know, from the same campus, are just coming together and bringing to y'all this space, right? Where again, we're just gonna be pushing. We're I want to say that we're gonna be pushing the envelope, right? And we're gonna have conversations that a lot of folks don't want to have. And we're talking about identity, we're talking about race, we're talking about nationality, we're talking about things that are happening here, right, in our communities. And when I say communities, it varies, right? Because as you all see, we all come from different backgrounds, right? I was born and raised in South Central. Extremely proud of where I'm coming from too. And a lot of people say, well, how do you talk about different issues and build unity, right? And I think everybody tries to just separate, or put categories into all the stuff that's going on in different neighborhoods. But at the end of the day, I think that's exactly what brings us together, a fight for justice, right? So yeah, I think for me it's just, I'm glad to see different folks. We're all from different spaces, and we see our communities being affected similarly, if not the same, right? So I think that's the strong glue that's gonna hold this together, and definitely gonna push, for us to talk to y'all, every single one of y'all, about just share the perspective and things that are going on. So um can y'all share a little bit about, and I know Susie, you talked a little bit, about your experience growing up in Ventura with your parents, do y'all mind, or are y'all comfortable with sharing a little bit about that experience, just your parents, and how that shaped and molded you, and just helped you become the person that you are today?
Ooh, that's a pretty deep question. I think that's like, I think growing up, so like Fillmore, um, it's like a very like a, it's like 99% Mexican American farm workers, and like, no, I'm lying, like 90%, and then 10% white. And I think growing up in a school where it was like, it was bad to be brown, it was like you had, like I was like there was a time in eighth grade actually, where there was a couple of like boys in my class, and they were, the shocking part is like they were like brown kids, and like actually my parents did this thing where they would go back and forth, have a kid, and then they were able to fix their papers and then go back to Mexico, and then raises there. And then when stuff got, shit got real with like NAFTA and stuff, and they couldn't afford like growing crops, and like maintaining a household, then we had to come to the U.S. But coming to the U.S. and going to a school where it's like a lot of brown folks, but then like the same brown folks are the ones who are like making fun of my skin color, right? I think that was pretty traumatic for me. So like the rest of the time that I was, in high school, and living in just in Fillmore, which is like such a small area, and just kind of like everyone knows each other. And there's not a lot of like, even though it's majority Mexican American, there's no sense of, there's like no one celebrating that pride, no one celebrating that culture. Way different than LA, way different than South Central, way different than Compton, way different than how people in LA just like, really there's celebration everywhere, so definitely growing up in Fillmore did shape a lot of, just it gave, I was like, ashamed of my skin color. I would, shower and try to like, scrub it off a little bit to see if like if it will get a little lighter. But definitely what changed my life was like, going when I went to CSUN and I went through the EOP program, right? They really taught me, and taking like my first Chicana Chicano ethnic studies class, right? They really changed my life, and they really just gave me some validation, and just really I started to learn more about myself, and that's where I felt like the healing started, right? But I definitely do shout out my parents though, because even though through my experience in school like that, they always just taught me to like be proud and like, uh and just never give up, right? So definitely they just, again, just taught me how to be kind even though when other people were being mean, and I think just how to persevere through that. So definitely, uh where I grew up definitely shaped who I am, and I think now it's a big influence that now I'm a teacher. Like every day I'm always fighting, just like I'm fighting the bullies, right? But sometimes the bullies were hurt at some point, right? So it's just like a cycle, right? It's like a crazy cycle. But every day I'm just kind of making sure I'm embracing my students' culture and identity, because I don't want them to feel how I felt when those boys bullied me, right? So definitely, um, again, it just shaped a lot of who I am today.
I can agree with that. Growing up in here in Reseda, California, I would say that it's a mixture of, say, people from Central America, Black community, Mexican community, white. So it's I've definitely seen that change. Predominantly now, there's more of a Mexican community presence here. But when I was going through like middle school, I would see that there was a separation between Central Americans and Mexicans. There was people who would just have arrived, their family just came over, and I would see the way that they would be treated just because they only spoke Spanish and they were new to English. So they were in those classes of English learners, but they were always treated like a second person. They weren't seen like an actual student. They were just like, oh, you'll get by. Not invited to any of the events happening. They felt left out. So it builds like a little bit of a community within themselves. So I was stuck between both of them, and I would communicate between both since I could relate to both of them. So I was like that, I would say, bridge between both of the communities growing up. But when I went to like CSUN, I took on both Chicano Chicana studies and Central American studies just because I didn't really know anything about Central America. And after going through CSUN for 4 years, I started to learn that I'm more leaning towards representation of Central Americans. But I'm not saying that I won't forget like my Mexican side because they both have their own history and struggles that they go through, even here in LA.
That's that's powerful right there. Yeah, and I'm telling you, I think we all live in different places, but our struggles is what bring this podcast together, right? Because I can relate, and Susie, you know, you might too. There's some pieces, Leo, in your story that I can relate to, and Susana, Susie también, right? It's the whole growing up in South Central, right? Yes, there's pride, and people take pride, in being Mexican and being Latino, Hispanic, right? They do, but just as there's pride, there's also that hate, amongst every culture, right? And I got to saw some of that. I got to see some of that, in school, right? I went to Santee for my first 3 years, right? And it's interesting because in Santee, I think what they did is they just got everybody who was labeled a troublemaker, right? And they just threw them in that school, right? And within the first few months, if not years, a riot broke out, right? And now there was this race tension between, not just I'm just gonna use Latino, Hispanic, right? Uh, and someone, I think you two might know that I don't consider myself as one, but I'm just gonna use it as that umbrella term for everybody else, right? Um, but there was just that tension between that community, and then there was that tension between the African American community, right? And that just kept going on and on and on, right? And yeah, riots broke out left and right. um but then also, you know growing up there, and being in that space, also I got to see some of that hatred between the Latino community, right? And I'm a clear example of it. Estoy piretito, right? Estoy moreno, right? Darker skin complexity, and I would have folks telling me, I would play football, and I would have folks telling me, just yelling, "Hey, pinche güero," But it's like, why would you call me güero, right? If you know that I'm not a güero, right? If I'm not light skinned, right? Um, and I didn't know that back then growing up. I didn't know that. I didn't know it. I didn't see it as a microaggression. Maybe it wasn't done intentionally. I don't know, right? But I think that's the piece, those little pieces that happen, right? And there was other instances, where it's like there's a gathering among students, and then I'm getting up to get a plate of food, and the jokes start cracking up left and right, and then one of my then high school classmates throws the term charcoal. Damn, bro, what are you doing, right? And then the jokes keep cracking up, and it's like, you're just as dark as charcoal. And at that moment, I'll be honest with y'all, I froze, and I was like, damn, like, really? Like, I looked at myself, I went back home and I sat down and I thought about it, and I'm like, did I really just get called charcoal, right? And at that time, I was thinking to myself, like, is there something wrong with me? Like, is it wrong for me to be of a darker skin complexity? um, the response to that maestro, during that time, and I think it's something that kind of just planted the seed about identifying myself as a Chicano and learning more about my history. Right? Is he immediately stopped it and he said, "Why are you? That is not acceptable." Right? And he went on to address it, but then I think what stood out to me throughout the whole time is he said, his darker skin complexity is a reflection of his ancestors, right? And I don't, it resonated, right? And it stuck with me. And so when I went to Santa Monica, you know, to Santa Monica College, I said, I'm gonna take a history course, right? And then that's where I took a Mexican American course by Dr. Raul Ruiz, right? Um, and it was the first step for me, to know more about not just my Mexican American history side here in the U.S., right, but know more about myself, right? So I think like Leo, through this journey, I was in the journey. I think now that I sit back and reflect, I don't think higher ed for me was to make a career out of a profession. I think for me, higher ed was finding myself, right, and answering that question of who am I, right? And that's where I took it. That's where I took it, and I learned more about Chicanismo, right? I learned more about being Mexican, and the ancestors too. Mm. But then within that, like Leo, right? I came across, and this this wall where it's like this concept, of Nepantla, right? Of being stuck in between, like, right? Y ahora sí, como dice la India María, right? No soy ni de aquí ni de allá, right? Because in Mexico, I could go to Mexico, right? But they'll call me Pocho, right? Because I won't be able to speak Spanish so fluently, right? But then here, I'm not American enough, right? Because I don't have that characteristic. I don't have that skin complexity. I don't fit in. I don't fit into that norm. So I think it's interesting that we all see that. Um, you know, uh, I don't know. What's your take, y'all?
What's interesting to me is the idea that what you mentioned, Susie, before about trying to rub when you shower, trying to rub away the darker skin complexity to try to see that lighter skin. I've definitely heard that from other people growing up too. That it's been put into our heads of that light skin is predominant the let's say the power here. If you're a darker, that's inferior. It's kind of like the idea that's been put out with even the idea of like Barbie dolls. I don't know if you've seen that test where they show a regular Barbie doll that's considered what is white, and then the black Barbie doll is one that's considered the inferior. People lean towards the
Mhm.
lighter skin one.
Yeah, and I think that's like just like it's just crazy because like I think the three of us, um, higher ed, like you mentioned, David, was more of us going to like yes, we for some of us we went because like a older sibling went or like that's the thing to do or like our parents worked hard and our guardians worked hard and like we had to pay them back by making them proud. I think that's a lot that's common for a lot of people from the Latino community. And but I think like I was not. I never imagined like I was gonna go to college to find myself. I think that's like part of the problem, right? Like why I know now it's like there's a big push in LA for like ethnic studies and like K through 12, uh, and thinking that, well, at least for I think for the three of us, right, we can say that through ethnic studies, right, whether it's Central American studies, whether it's Chicano studies, or Chicanx studies, or Asian American studies, Native American studies. I think we took or African American studies. We took those classes because they connected with us, right? So I think just like like, why do we gotta wait until college, right? What happens to those students, or like to those young people who don't make it there? And I think that's like what you were saying, right? And just like in South Central, there's pride. So when I come from Fillmore to like LA, and I see all these like brown people, like riding with their flags and like celebrating Dia de los Muertos, and I see that there's hatred between groups, I'm just like, what is going on here? I'm coming from a place where no one celebrates this. So I think that's where, like, if I wasn't careful enough, that's where like stereotypes can just like, oh, because this is true about them, right? And I think that's like, it's just like a lot to process, but that's like part of the issue, right? Why do we gotta wait until higher ed to learn about ourselves? There was when there were just one thing, one a quote that someone that it really stood out when there was a push for ethnic studies was um it was let me remember, it was when we're talking about privilege and white privilege, and someone said white privilege is when, I'm not gonna do justice to the quote, and I apologize already in advance, but I think you probably heard it, but it's like white privilege is when ethnic studies is taught, is an elective, you know.
Yeah, I think I know which one you're talking about. Yeah, I think white privilege is your history being taught as as a core class, and ethnic studies being taught as an elective. Right. Yeah. So sometimes, yeah, I've come. Yeah, powerful.
Something like that, right? Yeah, very right.
I don't know. I think something else that Leo, you bring, another piece of this discussion. You know, it, it's I don't know. I think it's just interesting because this initial piece, was supposed to be. I think it is about us, but we're diving into what we initially said would be our first episode, which is this concept of identity, right? And so we're just, I think, for all of y'all, who are listening, this is just scratching the surface, right? We're just getting started, right? With the concept of identity. Um, but Leo brings up another great discussion, and that's that constant struggle, battle between the Mexican community and the Central American community, right? That's another topic, that we're gonna be kind of just revealing along the way and kind of just talking about it. But it's something that needs to be addressed, right? Because in both communities, there's these phrases that are so common for folks to use, right? And it's just reveal a lot of hate, and I think that's Leo. I went into Central American studies, not being of Central American descent, right? But just to see what I myself can do to build that same bridge, right? And in this case, help you build that same bridge between the Central American community and the Mexican community, because I think that's the important piece that needs to be addressed, right? In order for us to see that just as we're struggling, right, that same struggle that the Mexicanos face, the Central Americans face as well, right? If not the same, similar struggles, right? And I think a lot of it has to do with the migration of Central American folks to the US, right? Because they experience a lot of harassment and violence, not just by the Mexican government, but by Mexican folks, right? So yeah, I think that bridge needs to be built, right? And I think this is a starting point, right, to have this discussion. So
Definitely. And to all the folks listening, just know that what we're going to be sharing in our podcast, Cafecito con Conciencia, um, it's coming out of our experiences, and like, it's not, we're not saying what we're saying is all facts, it's just kind of our experience, and based on our identity, so we don't speak for everybody, but we just want to create a space where we can talk about it, and especially right now with a lot going on, is just like, again, just creating a, like David said, platicas about centering our identity, and just talking about the issues that are happening in our communities, right?
Yeah, definitely a space where it's just our growing up in the different areas that we are and the experiences that we've had.
So before we let you all go, right? Before we tune out, I guess Cafecito con Conciencia, right? I think something that goes with it is, what's your favorite type of coffee? Or how do you like your coffee? A ver, who wants to go first? Or favorite cafe? I don't know. A ver.
To be honest, growing up, I was never really a coffee drinker at all. I always thought that I don't need that because I would see everyone around me drink coffee. Even my parents and my sister, they always drink coffee. But I never saw myself as a coffee drinker. I was more like, oh, I'm just drink some orange juice in the morning. But going after going to like college and all that, stressful and all classes, having to get that little boost to finish that paper. I definitely saw myself drinking more cold iced coffee, specifically more like mocha.
I think for me, mine was more like my mom used to make them all the time. It's more like leche con café, it's like 99% leche and like a little bit of coffee. I think that was like uh, my favorite, hands down, growing up, until similar to what Leo was just saying, like similar to like you're kind of forced to drink coffee because like everyone else is drinking coffee. And then for I think for me, like going to like Starbucks or going to those like coffee shops, and all these names are so like it's just so complicated to order a coffee, and I want to just taste like the way my mom made it. So, and it's like either like a upside down something or like a grande latte. I'm just like, but I think right now I'm also like a mocha lover, but also like right now I'm just really into frozen coffee from Dunkin' Donuts. Is hits the spot.
Cool, cool, cool. I grew up around coffee, you know. My parents drink it. Back at home, my tios drink it. You know, we're just cafeteros. Um, I like, the Nescafe when it's at home. You know, there's a little way for us to mix it. You know, um, but I do want to say El Cielitos Café Cubano is just on point. So if y'all ever get a chance, go visit El Cielito Cafe in Southgate and order that Café Cubano, and it's gonna get you started. So that's where I don't know that's where the idea of Cafecito con Conciencia grew up. You know, while visiting that spot. So I think it's just fair for me to give El Cielito Cafe a shout out. You know, they have good coffee. So check it out. Cool.
Since you're a cafetero, maybe you can run us on an episode about how you make the perfect coffee.
¿Qué pasó?
Since you
Yeah.
said you're a cafetero, maybe you can run us on another episode about how to make the perfect coffee.
Well,
Because it's hard, it's hard to balance it. Like,
it's like how our parents make food. Le echan un poquito de esto, otro poquito de esto, y un poquito de esto, and voila, it's done. It's
but
Right.
there's no measuring cups, so it's
Just
like
like
it's just
eyeballing it.
like this. And then when I make it, exactly, and then when you make it, it's like no sabe igual,
Yeah,
it's
it's
finished.
like the idea is like you can tell me the ingredients, you can tell me the measurements and all that, but it's never gonna come out the same unless you make it.
as I wouldn't be doing you all a favor. I wouldn't be doing you all a favor if I would give you measurements. So maybe in another episode, we'll do a video, where I show you all, how I make my cafecito, and that'll get it started. But in the meantime, we'll just keep having this critical platicas, you know, and thank you all for joining. Thank you all for listening. If you all have any questions, feel free to send them our way. Visit our Instagram at Cafecito Con Conciencia, right? And yeah, appreciate y'all. Any other words, folks?
I definitely look forward to expanding this conversations about just anything in growing up, be it current times or be it our background. Definitely important things we should have.
And if there's any topics that folks want to like throw our way that want us to like bring up or bring to light, just send them our way again to our website or to our Instagram. And thank you all for tuning in.
Peace out, y'all. Adios.
Nos vemos.
Drink your coffee.